What's up, everybody? It's your boy Showtimedr coming at you with the Bozel guide. So, had a lot of requests for this one. Fortunately, didn't have the time to do it, but here we go with it now. So, one thing to note, starts off as an infantry, but he's going to turn out to be a caster. Not sure if that's a mislabeled thing or not. He's a member of the Dark faction. Now, for whatever reason, when I pull him up with the Dark faction, he doesn't appear, but just know he's here. So these are all the characters in the game that he has synergy with. The Dark faction, which is known as the PvP faction in the mid-game, which is where a lot of us are now. So just something to note here. Now the capture is kind of wonky. I'm gonna have to... it's hard to capture both pages, which is odd, but there we go. Alright, so let's go over it here. Oh, dang it, I forgot one thing on the other page. Well, real quick, replaces intelligence with 1.5 times magic defense after dealing damage to an enemy. 50% chance to deal 1 random debuff, and then when you increase that to 6 stars, that unfortunately only does 100% bonus on the random debuff. You never get an extra 1.5 times magic defense. That's just standard, by the way. That's separate from this. So keep that in mind, though, because there's going to be a lot of stuff that I won't recommend that you guys will usually be like, well, what about this? So it's like, well, yeah, but that gives intelligence bonus. His spells don't have nothing to do with intelligence. It's magic defense times 1.5, no matter what. Just the way it is. So, but it opens up some unique things, so we'll get into it here. So there's 2 builds that I saw that I thought were good. You could go Mage, Dark Prince. You could go Mage, Reaper, Death Lord. Both of them have different things going on. We'll look at the middle path first, and then I'll show you the other ones. So Mage, you got your typical Trooper, magic damage. Get 2 good skills right off. Sleep. Sleep is very good when dealing with either enemy tanks or anyone that has like Barb or anything dumb like that, really fat regen. But just in general, also really good against like enemy Lianas, etc. that do a bunch of healing. So it dispels 3 buffs, 0.25 single target damage. Remember, it's based off his M defense. Enemy cannot move during the next turn, cannot be dispelled. So it's always a 1-turn hard lockdown no matter what. Yeah, it can't be dispelled, so... And then you get a Fireball, which is going to be his first direct damage, 1.5 times damage, bonus against infantry. So if you're fighting against an infantry tank unit, these first couple skills are actually going to be pretty nasty versus that guy. So anyone like, although it doesn't really work as well on Leiden, because Leiden's tanky tree, he can go Paladin. But either way, if you happen to be fighting against an infantry class tank, that'll be there. Now we're going to go to Dark Mage. So what Dark Mage does, you got your troopers here. One thing to know about the troopers, all the undead troopers, they get this resurrect, so even if they all get wiped, whenever you initiate combat, it's going to restore 50% of their HP. So, it's just the way it is. And then Rock Golems, these are Lancer units, so good to have if you're fighting against a bunch of horse units, cavalry units. I had someone mock me for saying cavalry, so cavalry units. And when soldier health is below 70%, defense is increased by 20%. So pretty good tanky unit there for you. And then he also gets Dark Scythe. Yeah, spelled like that too, that's funny. Attacks a single enemy, dealing 1.3 times damage, ignores 30% of enemy's magic defense, so you get some penetration there. And then after battle, restores 50% of HP dealt, or damage dealt as HP rather, so... Gonna make him even nastier in PvP because this is guaranteed to do a lot of damage simply because of the ignore. But 1.3 times and already 1.5 times of his magic defense. Then he gets half of whatever damage he does as healing, so that's pretty ridiculous. I forget, was Deathlord? I think Deathlord was to the left, yeah. So Dark Prince is the one on the right, so we'll go to that first. So this will be the final tree in the middle path. So things to note, you get your Dark Elf Archer. You get your Rock Colossus. Dark Elf Archer, as long as they're at 100%, if you can manage to keep range, these guys are actually going to do really good damage. If you need physical damage versus magic damage, these are actually going to be the troops for you, because some things, they're more immune to magic damage, like other casters, healers, etc. So getting some physical in on them is pretty good. Now your Rock Colossus, that's your upgraded Lancer. Pretty much the same thing, except now it's whenever below 70% damage taken is decreased by 10%. And if you remember, 70% defense is increased by 20%. So which one is better? Depends how high the defense is on your troops, pretty much, is the way it's going to go. But usually it's going to be the upgraded versions, just because they're going to have more stats, etc. So now we're going to get to his abilities in this tree. Dark Waltz, here's a faction buff for Dark. So if you're really into PvP, this one's a sick buff. Super sick buff. We'll get into it. Attack and defense increase significantly. Grants the buff when battling against enemies with more than 3 debuffs. All stats are increased by 15%. Well, if you remember... Well, actually, there's a bunch of suggestion stuff I'm going to give to you. But Bozel, he specializes at putting debuffs in. In fact, this next skill is a good example. So Earthquake, magic defense, or magic damage rather. Multiple enemies within range, 0.4 AoE damage. With a bonus against flyers, which I don't know why, since it's Earthquake, but whatever. Maybe it's something else. They might have mistranslated that, I'm not sure. But enemies' attack, intelligence, and defense is decreased by 20% last 2 turns. Well, more than 3 debuffs, when Dark Waltz goes off, you're gonna have 15% additional stats for all your people, all your buddies in the Dark faction, which if you forget... all these cats right here, some really powerful damage dealers. Zarita, Egbert, you know, Sonya actually does good damage. She's pretty underrated. Bernhardt. Oh, that's weird. Why is there 2 Bernhardts? Wonder if that's a typo. Whatever. My kingdom for a webpage with no typos. But anyhow, so that's really good. So if you're going the Dark path, this is definitely the tree for you, unless you're going to go with another Dark faction buff. Always possible. So now we're going to get into the Reaper and the Death Lord. So Reaper, once you're going from the base class, these skeletons, they operate the same basic way. If they're at 0, they're going to restore 50% of their HP, make them that much tankier. Now, here is the tree you're going to go if you want to really focus on magic damage in AoE. Because, first of all, these troopers, the Thermituges, you'll see the upgraded versions later, but just these base ones, initiating combat, always initiating combat. Attack is increased by 20%, just straight up. That's really good when you need to get magic damage out. Decay, that's a skill you're going to get from this tree. Multiple enemies, 0.3 AoE damage, prevents enemies from receiving buffs. Pretty strong in PvP. And then, so, we're going to go down to, not Summoner... Death Lord. Alright, so Death Lord. You get the troopers, it's the same thing. Resurrect, but now they also, whenever they're attacked, they get defense increased 10%, makes them a little bit tankier. Wizards, when attacking, attack and magic defense is increased by 30%, so not only does your attack go crazy with magic, but you get that fat magic defense bonus on them as well, so if you're fighting against magical enemies... These are your troops right here, then. So your passive here, Seal. When dealing damage to enemies, this makes it, by the way, for me. 50% chance to deactivate enemies' active skills last 2 turns. Passive, guys. Passive. So dealing damage, remember all those fat AoEs you get. You have a 50% chance just to seal everything that they do. You know, assuming they don't have immunity, etc. And then at that point, they're going to need a Dispel from Liliana. So, and then Black Hole attacks multiple enemies within range, dealing 0.36 AoE damage. Deals 2 random debuffs to each troop. So, 2 random debuffs, you got fat AoE there. That could turn out to be super good. And then lastly, we'll go over the Summoner tree. Find it here. There it is. Alright, so Summoner tree. So you get, what's funny is you get your classical physical damager is more for the assassin. So the ambusher, crits increased by 20%. Not terrible if you're doing physical damage. Ballista, remember these guys can actually attack from 3 squares away. When initiating combat, troop damage decreases by 30%. 7% chance to deal a strong debuff. Is that right? The initiating damage? I'd have to look at the ballista troopers in the game, but... I mean, that wouldn't surprise me. Ballistas That is kind of how they work in real life. So Summoner Tree, it's just like, you can summon a troop of Necromancers, but although the one caveat to this is, you do get, the AI does tend to be really dumb when there's a Summon Undead unit on the field, and they'll start blowing cooldowns on them and stuff just because they're so weak. So it's a good way to eat up a troop, but I wouldn't recommend going Summoner early. I would say if you want the faction buff, go the middle path. If you want the just pure magic damage chaos path, go the left path. Left path will do a little bit better overall, in my opinion, in PvP. But it's not like the middle path is bad for PvP, so just being able to disable active skills is pretty strong for a passive. Now, as far as builds, assuming you unlock the left tree, I would probably go sleep. I'd have sleep on both, no matter what. Do sleep, and then assuming if you're going... Let me get down to it here, the Deathlord path. You're probably going to want Seal, and then you're going to want a big fat AoE, which Black Hole is actually not a terrible AoE. Now, if you're going the Dark Prince path, you're going to want Dark Waltz for the faction buff, unless you got another faction buff you're running. You're going to want Earthquake for sure, because that instantly gets you 3 debuffs. And then you probably want Sleep as well for that. So those are my recommendations for builds on those things. Now, Bozel's a little bit of a unique thing, because since intelligence doesn't matter for him, you actually are prioritizing magic defense. A little bit physical defense, a little bit HP, crit, skill, as it's called in this game. And that's pretty much it for his skills, so you get to not worry about intelligence, which is actually kind of nice. So right now we'll get into gear. Let me go ahead and bring that up. Already at the gear tree. Let me get my recommendations pulled up. Alright, so for your weapons, you are going to want the Aestroth, which is when battling enemies afflicted with debuffs. Once again, he puts up debuffs like crazy. Let me get myself out of the way this time. I keep forgetting to do that. He puts debuffs up like crazy. So intelligence increases by 3%. That multiplier will go up as you star up the weapon or break up the weapon. When initiating combat, 15% chance to stun the enemy after battle. Works on... I think that only works on single targets. It would be kind of super strong if that worked on AoE. So I'm pretty sure that only works on single targets, but still, that's still really strong. Let me get the freaking mastery tree out the way, my bad. So Miracle Staff, that's right next to it. AoE damage increases by 3%. When dealing damage, 15% chance to deal 1 powerful debuff to an enemy. So that just says dealing damage, so I'm figuring that counts on AoEs, so that'd be pretty good there. And then we got to go all the way down to 7-1 to get the Purgatory. So your Purgatory, intelligence plus 1%, you can kind of ignore that. When dealing damage at the end of the next turn, the enemy takes fixed damage once. Damage equals 1 times hero's intelligence. Which is funny, because all things considered, like I said, you're not supposed to worry about intelligence. But if you happen to have this weapon, dealing an additional fixed damage also gives you a chance to deal additional procs. So... could be really good, could not be really good, who knows. Like to see that one tested myself. And then as far as armor, it's pretty much the same thing I recommend on every caster, guys, the Death Robe. It's going to increase their survivability like crazy, crit decrease by 20% when attacked, 15% chance to increase enemies' damage taken by 20%. So if anyone gets to him, gonna help him survive, gonna help him amp up damage a little bit, be pretty good. Now the helmet, there are actually some good helms here. I'll go to 3-1. HP plus 2% when eliminating an enemy on this turn after taking action deals fixed damage to enemies within 2 blocks. Damage equals 10% max HP. So for this to be really good, you'd have to focus max HP, but it'll get better as we get better gear and percentages, etc. And then also there's the Soul Stealer headdress, which is right here. Magic defense plus 2%, good for your damage. After taking action, 25% chance to deactivate active skills of 1 enemy within 3 blocks. Another chance to deactivate active skills. So, pretty awesome there. Now, as far as accessories goes, kind of hilarious here, the Veil of Light. Magic defense plus 1.5. Helps damage, immune, defense, and magic defense down. Magic defense is a base stat, so actually works out for him, even though it's funny. The Veil of Light. And then Vidar's Rose. Intelligence 1.5, you know. When actively dealing damage, 25% chance to dispel one buff from the enemy. So you're doing the AoEs. Not only are you putting up debuffs, you got a chance to remove buffs with this item. Has base and magic defense for your damage. Intelligence is a whatever, but that's what I recommend for gear, guys. Now, as far as enchantments go, there's a couple ways you could go. Go ahead and pull it up. So what you can do, there's the classic one, so... Well, not this one. That one's not terrible, though. Skill damage increases by 10%, AoE extra 5% with the magic one. And same thing with attack and intelligence, even though you don't really need intelligence or attack per se. But that's just the way the enchants are with the two sets. This one, HP above 80%, attack and defense up 10%, not terrible. Rough Sea, when actively attacking and entering battle, attack increases by 10%, damage taken is decreased by 15%. This would go really well if you're running those undead troopers, because they're already by nature not that tanky because there's holy units in the game. But if you can get them a little bit less damage taken, and then, you know, they also have that self-resurrection if they do get wiped, so this will help keep them up a little bit more and deal less damage to your hero, which would be pretty awesome. And then lastly, you could always do the damage dealt static 10% increase after taking chance to increase mobility. So if you really want your Bozel on the run, Breeze is probably it for you. And then I've seen a couple people do the crit damage route with Blazing Sun, and then also the Meteor. Troops above 80%, all damage dealt after entering battle, plus 20%, crit plus 5%. So that's up to you. You also have the chance to make them tankier if you want, but personally most people go for the first couple skill damage, AoE damage, etc. And so that's pretty much it, guys, for Bozel. So we're going to make our huge difference in PvP. PvE, he can make a good difference, but mostly on grouped up when there's lots of enemies. That's where he's going to make his difference. So anyways, guys, that's going to be it for me. Hopefully you enjoyed this Bozel guide. Try to get couple more out today. I also got a stream, so we'll see how it goes. So I'll catch you guys later on. Peace out. Oh wait, I should do my promo, huh? Yo, I'm Showtime Doctor, Showtime DR. You found my YouTube. Hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. Also, check the title info. There's a link to the Discord as well as my Twitch and the wikis for this character, Bozel. So Twitch, gonna stream this game later. There's a Discord, got a tab for this game, yada yada yada. So, catch you guys later on. Peace.